Folks, hello and welcome to Tavern Chat. So, quick, we'll jump into the topic at hand. Yes, United Paizo workers. Not a joke. This is legit. Paizo's staff of 30 plus members announced today, early this afternoon, so about 5, 6 hours ago, that they had formed a union, the United Paizo Workers, one of the first unions of its kind in the tabletop game industry. Well, I'm going to say it's probably, well, I'm damn well sure it is the only union in the tabletop industry, unless there's one at Hasbro, right? Because Hasbro is large enough. You need a large enough company to form a union. You're not going to have a company with like 7 members form a union. There's no point. So I would say this is probably a first. Congratulations to them. Uh, I don't know that their graphic reminds me of the Soviet hammer and sickle, even though it isn't. I understand that. Just I get that feel from it, but then a lot of unions kind of like that look, like that feel. So, why is this important? What impact is this going to have on the gaming industry? Very little. All right, this is my humble opinion. And what do I say? Very little, because I don't think any other companies have staffing to the levels where you have enough to unionize. I'm surprised even Paizo does at this point. I would have thought that Paizo, uh, with the pandemic, with the way their sales have been, they're not bad, but they're not what they were at the height of Pathfinder 1. That, oh, well, maybe this is a downsized Paizo. Now, I'm going to assume this includes all roles, not just creative roles, but also maintenance, shippers, customer service, all that stuff. All right. So there's an article on this, actually, over at Dicebreaker. Paizo workers at Pathfinder publisher Paizo have announced the formation of the United Paizo Workers Union. Staff say they are underpaid for their labor, required to live in one of the most expensive cities in the United States, and subjected to untenable crunch conditions on a regular basis. Now, all right, underpaid for their labor. I think that everybody who was a creative with maybe a handful, that can be counted on one hand, of exceptions in this industry, are underpaid for their labor. I can't argue with that, right? They're required to live in one of the most expensive cities in the United States, Seattle. They certainly do. And it is certainly expensive. I live in New York City. New York City is expensive. But I don't think I could live in Seattle. I'm sure many, if not most, of their employees are have roommates or are in committed relationships and are sharing the expenses. That's just a piece of life for most people in these higher priced environments. You're not living in, I don't know, the Pocono Mountains. You're not listening on the plains of the prairies of Kansas, right? You're living in Seattle. You're gonna pay for that. Now, and they are subjected to untenable crunch conditions on a regular basis. I think if you are a creative at a major creative company, that is part and parcel of what you signed up for. So I don't really. Well, then again, you knew going to Seattle was going to be one of the most expensive cities. So, before I was a cop, I worked for Stern's department store here in New York City. And at the time, there was only one department store chain that was unionized. That was Macy's. Macy's was unionized. And their union was trying to get a foothold in another department store chain. And at the time, Macy's and Stern's were owned by different corporate entities. So there was the rumbling and the whispering that Stearns out in Flushing was going to have a vote to go union. And Stearns, the management, let the employees know unofficially, but also without any question, there was no chance of misinterpreting this, that if we went union, they would just close the store. Now, this was early 90s. Unions were powerful back then, more powerful than they are now. Needless to say, Stearns did not get unionized. What's funny is that the corporate entity that owned Stearns and A&S and Orbex at the time wound up buying out Macy's and then rebranding themselves at Macy's. So it's likely that all these old stores that were not unionized, these locations that became Macy's, are probably all unionized now. So, what are these workers at Paizo going to expect? Well, they're going to want probably higher raises. I'm going to guess healthcare benefits, shorter work hours, overtime for those crunch times, right? Nobody gives pensions anymore, right? But they're going to want some kind of profit sharing 401k, right? So what do we have here? So the United, not PIO, I guess that's a typo. United Paizo Workers Union, in coordination with the Communication Workers of America, CWA is a big umbrella union. You would think, all right, Communication Workers of America, what is that? Like AT&T, 9X, Verizon, or what? Oh, these old phone company. No, more than that, they actually cover some of the job titles of civilians within the NYPD and other civilians in city employment. They are extremely large union. So they've gotten their foothold, the CWA now, in the RPG industry. I'm sure they're hoping to expand it. And I am sure that the United Paizo Workers Union is hoping to uh, use the CWA's influence. I don't think it's going to work that way, but in any case, there's a letter. The letter states that Paizo workers have been organizing for, I guess I'm choosing I have been organizing for some time, but were spurred to act by the September firing of customer service and community manager Sarah Marie. Now, remember, we had this whole rigmarole with these expose tweets that came out last month, and what they call the sudden departure of customer service representative Diego Valdez. I believe that Diego supposedly left because Sarah was fired, and several others in the recent past. I find it interesting that they're not naming the former Paizo employee with the bad cowboy hat that did this expose. But in any case, many former and current employees, as well as freelancers and contract workers, took the opportunity to share stories of abuse, harassment, treatment, and hostile management. Well, I got news for you. If you are a freelancer or a contract worker, the union is no use to you. Maybe you're going to trickle down effect to get anything positive, but you are not included in those negotiations. You are not included in any protections that a union employee might get. Now, the letter goes on to say Paizo workers are underpaid for their labor, required to live in one of the most expensive cities in the United States, subject to untenable crunch conditions on a regular basis. And they are asking Paizo management to voluntarily recognize their union and open good faith negotiations for better working conditions and stronger worker protections. The letter ends with a request for the tabletop community to lend their voice in this push. All right. I spent 20 years as basically a union member. We didn't call it a union, it was a benevolent association. I either was part of the Police Benevolent Association or the Sergeants Benevolent Association. And yes, they bargained for us. And they withheld dues that you paid, and your collective bargaining with the city was done with your union. And our union managed not our health plans, but our prescription plans, dental, vision, stuff like that. I don't see that happening here. This isn't a large enough entity. The union's not going to be large enough. So, what impact is this going to have on gaming? I don't know if Paizo is going to take the high road and say, "Oh yes, this is a wonderful idea. Let's let's let the union negotiate for you all," or they might go, "We're not going to recognize the union," and then it becomes a bit of a battlefield. Now, for some of those who might be out there going, "Doesn't this sound like something that happened not too long ago?" Well, not too long ago, Kickstarter employees voted to unionize in a big step for tech. Engineers and others at the crowdfunding platform voted narrowly to form a union, one of the first tech companies to do so. This was February 18th of 2020. So we're talking more than a year and a half ago. So they unionized. Now they had there was it wasn't overwhelming number of votes. There was 46 employees voting in favor, 37 opposed. I think a half dozen or so abstained from voting. Now, why would that be different in Kickstarter? Well, Kickstarter, they're saying now Kickstarter's in Brooklyn. These employees are mostly in Brooklyn, right? Also, one of the most expensive locations to work in or for is a metropolitan area. It's up there with Seattle. Okay. But a lot of the ones that voted against unionizing said, saying, "Hey, we're kind of well paid for what we do. We don't want to rock the boat." Now, the Paizo employees are saying something different, right? They feel they're underpaid for the work they do, and they very well might be. Again, this is not tech. This is the gaming industry. You know, with the exception of a few of these Kickstarters out there, or the $9 million Twitch channel is raised. You don't get rich in this industry. Okay, so on the Paizo employees underpaid, certainly. Now, what did Kickstarter do? Well, Kickstarter actually fired the two main protagonists in the effort to set up the union. They got fired for reasons that were apparently not related to their union rabble rousing activities. Again, what does this mean for the gaming community? If you are a creator at any other company, and now remember, how many companies have actual staff, right? Most everybody's a freelancer. Isn't that the way Wizards of the Coast runs everything? You have like maybe like if there's a dozen people, I know that, and when I say a dozen, you have to remember too, we're talking staff. We're not talking management. Wizards has a number of people in management position. Management position is not covered under the union. Same thing's going to go with Paizo. If you are in a management position, this is not going to be something where you are going to be able to be carried over or covered by a union protecting you or fighting for your interests. So I think in the long run, it's going to have very little effect on the community. But if you're a Paizo fan, it certainly might have an effect on future projects. Prices may increase if the cost of your employees increases substantially. Something to watch, something be interesting to see how this plays out. Folks, we are still in the midst of the world of the pandemic. As always, I ask you to use your common sense to keep yourself, your family, your friends healthy and safe. Be safe, be well. God bless. Roll those dice. I will be back tomorrow with Glenn Hallstrom at 8 p.m. Eastern doing Dungeons, Dragons, and Discourse. And I should be in a Poconos when I do it. So hopefully I have a good enough connection. All right, folks. On that note,